The rain came down in fine, silver needles that night, whispering against the cracked neon sign of Marty's Diner. It was the kind of rain that made the streets look like mirrors, reflecting the tired lights of a town that never quite recovered from its better days. Inside, the smell of coffee, bacon grease, and old vinyl seats hung thick in the air. The place was nearly empty. Just a few locals hunched over their late night meals and a young waitress named Emily Carter, moving with quiet grace between the booths. Emily was 23. Soft-spoken but strong in the way people become when life hasn't given them any other choice. Her brown hair was tied up in a messy bun, wisps falling around her face as she refilled a coffee cup for the only customer at the counter. A middle-aged man with tired eyes and a small, folded photograph he kept glancing at between sips. His name was Jack Turner. To anyone watching, he looked like any other man trying to forget something. But the scar running along his jaw and the way his shoulders squared when someone entered the diner said otherwise. Jack had seen war. He'd fought in it, lived through it, and lost more than he cared to remember. The bell above the door jingled, slicing through the hum of the rain and the low buzz of an old radio playing blues in the background. 3 men stumbled in, loud, laughing, drunk. They carried the storm with them, the smell of whiskey, the weight of arrogance, and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. The biggest of them, broad-shouldered, red-faced, and already barking orders, was Rick Dalton, a man known around town for his temper and for the way people tried to avoid him. Emily stiffened. She'd seen them before. Rick and his 2 shadows, Chase and Eddie. They came in once or twice a month after closing time, usually after too many drinks at Murphy's bar. They always caused trouble. Tonight, she prayed they'd just eat and leave. "Hey, sweetheart." Rick's voice boomed across the diner. "You still serving or are you just standing there looking pretty?" The few customers remaining turned their heads. Emily forced a polite smile. "We're open. Take any booth you like." Rick grinned, elbowing his buddies as they slid into the corner booth near the window. "Oh, we'll take that one," he said, pointing right next to Jack Turner's seat at the counter. Jack didn't look up. He just stirred his coffee, slow and deliberate, his eyes flicking toward the reflection in the metal napkin holder. Emily walked over, pad in hand. "What can I get you gentlemen tonight?" Rick leaned back, eyes scanning her from head to toe. "You can start by smiling, sweetheart. You look too serious for a Friday night." She didn't flinch. "Would you like the usual? Burgers and beers?" Rick smirked. "You remember. That's cute." Then, leaning forward, his tone turned sharp. "But we'll need the beers first. Cold ones." Emily nodded and turned to get them, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the bottles. Jack's voice came low, just loud enough for her to hear. "You don't have to put up with that," he said, eyes still fixed on his cup. She looked at him, his calm, steady presence somehow grounding her. "It's fine," she whispered. "They'll be gone soon." But Jack knew better. Men like Rick didn't leave quietly. When she returned with the beers, Rick grabbed one too quickly, sloshing foam onto the table. "Oops," he said with mock surprise. "Wes, you'll have to clean that up, honey." Emily hesitated, her jaw tightening. Before she could reach for a napkin, Rick's hand shot out and caught her wrist. "You got soft hands," he said, his grin twisting into something cruel. "Not what I'd expect from a diner girl." "Let go," she said quietly. He laughed, tightening his grip. "What's the rush? We're just talking." The diner fell silent. Even the rain outside seemed to hold its breath. Jack's eyes lifted from his coffee cup. They were cold now, sharp, assessing. He'd seen this before, in darker places, under worse lights. Men who thought power was measured by who they could hurt. "Rick," Jack said evenly, his voice calm but with an undertone that made Chase and Eddie glance up. She said to let go. Rick turned, sneering. "Oh, and who the hell are you, her daddy?" Jack met his gaze. "Just someone who doesn't like seeing cowards pick on women." A thin smile crossed Rick's face. "Coward, huh? You looking for trouble, old man?" Jack slowly set his coffee cup down, the clink against the counter echoing in the quiet diner. "No," he said softly. "But I'm not afraid of it either." For a moment, no one moved. Then Rick shoved Emily aside. Standing up so fast his chair screeched across the linoleum. His hand shot out, pushing her shoulder hard enough to send her stumbling into a table. The sound of shattering glass filled the air as a plate crashed to the floor. Emily gasped, clutching her arm. Jack rose, every muscle in his body coiling tight. He hadn't wanted a fight. But the second Rick's hand struck her, something inside him ignited. The soldier buried beneath the quiet exterior stirred, awake again. Rick took a step closer, grinning. "What are you gonna do, huh?" Jack didn't answer. His stance shifted just slightly. Weight centered, eyes calm, breathing slow. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks. For a long second, the diner was a vacuum. No sound, no motion, just the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. Then Rick's laugh tore through it, harsh and mocking. "What's this? You gonna play hero now?" he sneered, spreading his arms wide. "Simon, old man, show me what you got." Jack didn't move. He simply studied him. The way Rick's weight shifted unevenly on his feet. The unsteady gleam in his eyes. The sloppy confidence of a man who'd never been in a real fight. Jack's voice came low. "You should sit down, son. Walk away while you still can." Rick's face flushed red. "Son," he barked. "I'm not your damn kid." He lunged forward, fast but clumsy. Jack sidestepped easily, one hand pushing Rick's arm away while the other guided him forward. A simple redirect that sent Rick stumbling into the counter. His beer bottle tipped and rolled, spilling across the floor. Chase and Eddie jumped up, knocking over their chairs. "Hey, you don't touch him!" Chase shouted. Jack didn't even glance at them. His voice was level, but steel-edged every word. "Sit down. Both of you." Something in the way he said it, that tone that carried authority without needing to prove it, made them hesitate. Maybe it was the stance, or the steady eyes, or maybe it was the faint tremor in his voice that said, "I've been through worse than you could ever imagine." Rick, furious and humiliated, turned around, fists clenched. "You think you're tough?" he roared, charging again. This time Jack didn't step aside. He moved in. One step, smooth, direct. His elbow met Rick's forearm with a crack, deflecting the swing. Then his fist drove into Rick's gut, just below the ribs. The sound was dull, brutal, final. Rick folded, gasping for air. Jack caught him by the collar before he could fall, leaned in close, and whispered something only Rick could hear. Then he released him. Rick collapsed to the floor, coughing and cursing. Emily stood frozen near the jukebox, her hand trembling over her mouth. The other customers stared in disbelief. The quiet man at the counter had just dropped the town's loudest bully like he was nothing. Jack took a step back, breathing evenly. The soldier in him was awake now. But not wild, not reckless, controlled, dangerous only as much as needed. "You done?" he asked. Rick looked up from the floor, his face red and eyes blazing with humiliation. "Yo, you think this is over?" he rasped. Jack sighed. "I'm hoping it is." Then, to Emily, "You okay?" She nodded shakily, her voice barely a whisper. Yeah, thank you." Rick tried to push himself up, but his strength failed him. Jack turned his gaze toward Chase and Eddie. "Take your friend and go." For a moment, they didn't move. Then, muttering curses, they each grabbed Rick by the arms and dragged him out into the rain. The bell above the door jingled softly as it shut behind them, leaving behind the echo of a storm that had just passed. Silence filled the diner again. The radio hummed softly, "I Fall to Pieces," by Patsy Cline playing faintly through the static. Emily exhaled, her shoulders slumping as the tension drained out of her. Jack went back to his stool, picked up his cup, and took a slow sip of his coffee. Cold now, but he didn't seem to mind. After a moment, Emily approached him. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Jack replied. "Just be safe." She hesitated. "You could have been hurt." I've been hurt before," Jack said quietly, his gaze distant, somewhere far away. Something about the way he said it made her pause. She saw the shadow in his eyes. The kind that doesn't come from the world outside, but from the one inside. Memories too heavy to name. "You were in the service?" she asked softly. He nodded once. "Marine Corps." "How long?" "Long enough." She wanted to ask more, but she sensed the weight behind those two words and decided to leave it. Instead, she brought him a fresh cup of coffee. "On the house." He nodded his thanks. Outside, the rain intensified, sheets of water sliding down the glass windows like tears. The neon sign flickered, humming weakly in the storm. Emily wiped the counter, trying to calm her racing thoughts. "Those guys," she murmured. "They come in sometimes. Always drunk. Rick's got a record, fights, dues. The police never do much." Jack's voice was calm. "They will now." She frowned. "You think they'll press charges?" "No," he said, staring into his cup. "But I think they'll think twice next time." She smiled faintly, though her hands still shook. "I still can't believe you stepped in like that." Jack looked up at her. No one should get hit for doing their job. There was something in his tone, firm but gentle, that made her throat tighten. She'd worked here for 2 years, most nights alone, enduring comments and leers she pretended not to hear. No one had ever stood up for her. Until tonight. As the minutes passed, the diner slowly settled back into its rhythm. The cook in the back poked his head out to make sure everything was all right. The old man in the corner booth went back to his crossword puzzle. But outside, headlights flashed through the rain. A truck idled across the street, engine running, lights dim. Rick's truck. He hadn't gone far. And he wasn't done. Inside, Jack turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing toward the window as if he could feel the danger before seeing it. Old instincts stirred. The storm, it seemed, wasn't over yet. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows and bending the flickering neon sign so that the word DIR blinked on and off like a warning. Inside, Emily was restocking napkins, trying to calm the tremor in her hands. But Jack's attention wasn't on his coffee anymore. His eyes were fixed on the rain, blurred window where the dull glow of headlights stayed too long unmoving. Rick Dalton's truck sat across the street, engine rumbling low. Jack had seen that look before. Someone who couldn't let humiliation rest. Some men couldn't walk away from their pride. It was a fuse waiting to burn down to something dangerous. He reached for a few bills, slid them under his empty plate, and stood. "Emily," he said quietly, "lock the door." She frowned, glancing at the clock. "We're still open for another hour." "Not tonight," he said, eyes never leaving the window. "Lock it." She hesitated, reading the seriousness in his tone, then nodded and moved to the door. The click of the bolt sliding into place sounded louder than usual. Jack's reflection in the glass was still, controlled. The Marine in him was back, nodding uniform, but in the way his eyes moved, scanning corners, noting exits, listening for footsteps through the sound of rain. Across the street, the truck's engine cut off. The driver's side door creaked open. Rick stepped out, clutching something in his right hand. A metal pipe glinting beneath the diner's lights. Chase and Eddie followed behind, shoulders hunched against the rain, faces grim. Emily froze. "Oh no," Jack's voice was steady. "Get to the back. Call 911. Tell them Rick Dalton's about to commit assault. But go," he said firmly. His tone not angry but absolute. The kind of voice you only use when you've given orders that matter. Emily turned and ran toward the kitchen, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. Outside, the 3 men approached, laughter muffled by the rain. Rick's voice came through the storm, slurred but loud. "You think you can make a fool out of me, huh? In my town." Jack moved closer to the door, keeping himself between the men and everyone else inside. He didn't look angry. He looked ready. The first hit came fast. The crash of metal against glass as Rick slammed the pipe against the front window. It cracked but didn't shatter. The second blow would have done it if Jack hadn't opened the door first. Rain swept in, soaking the floor. Jack stood in the doorway, rain dripping down his jacket. "You really want to do this?" he asked. Rick sneered. "I want you to beg." Jack shook his head slowly. "That's not going to happen." Rick swung the pipe, wide and wild. Jack ducked, catching Rick's wrist mid-swing and twisting sharply. The pipe clattered to the wet pavement. In one smooth motion, Jack shoved him backward, sending him sprawling into a puddle. Eddie lunged forward with a yell, but Jack pivoted. His elbow caught Eddie in the chest, knocking the air out of him. Chase hesitated, then threw a punch that barely grazed Jack's jaw before Jack's counter landed square in his shoulder. The man stumbled back, slipping on the slick ground. It was over in seconds. 3 men, soaked and gasping, sprawled in the mud. Rick cursed, spitting wider, his rage boiling into something almost pathetic. "You think you're a hero?" he roared, struggling to his knees. Jack crouched beside him, his voice low and dangerous. "No, heroes don't pick fights. They stop them." Rick met his eyes. Something flickered there, a flash of fear or maybe realization, before Jack stood and stepped back. Police sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing louder. Emily appeared in the doorway, phone still in her hand, her face pale but relieved. "They're coming," she said. Jack nodded. "Good." Rick staggered up, wiping rain and blood from his lip. "You're gonna regret this." He spat. "You don't know who I am." Jack looked at him with the calm of a man who'd faced far worse threats. "I know exactly who you are," he said. "The kind of man who'll spend the night in a cell wondering why the world doesn't fear him anymore." When the police arrived, lights flashing red and blue across the diner windows. The three men were handcuffed and led away, shouting protests that no one cared to hear. The rain began to ease, the storm finally losing its fury. Emily stepped outside, her breath visible in the cool air. Jack was still standing there, rain dripping from his hair, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets like he hadn't just taken down three men with nothing but calm precision. "You didn't have to stay," she said softly. "I did," he replied. "People like that don't stop until someone makes them." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the tiredness behind his eyes. The strength wasn't from pride, but from something heavier, older. "Why'd you come here tonight?" she asked after a pause. He gave a faint smile. "Just passing through. Needed coffee and quiet." "Well," she said, smiling for the first time that night. "Guess you didn't get much of either." Jack chuckled, a rare sound that seemed to warm the air between them. "No," he admitted. "But I got something better." Before she could ask what, he turned to look at the flashing lights fading down the street, his expression distant again. "Peace," he said softly. "For once, I did something that made sense." And for a man like him, that meant everything. Inside, the diner lights glowed softly against the wet glass. The storm had passed, but something told Emily that Jack's story was far from over. The police lights eventually faded into the distance, swallowed by the night and the rain that was now nothing more than a soft drizzle. The diner stood quiet again, though the silence felt different this time. Heavier, charged with the echo of what had just happened. Emily locked the door once more, her hands trembling slightly as she turned the bolt. Jack was still sitting at the counter, a towel draped over his shoulders. He'd refused medical attention, insisting he was fine. The cut on his knuckle said otherwise, but he didn't seem to notice him. "Coffee's on the house," Emily said quietly as she poured him another cup. He gave her a faint smile. "You already said that. Then call it a thank you refill," she said, sliding the cup toward him. "I don't think I can ever thank you enough." Jack lifted the cup, steam curling around his fingers. "You don't need to," he said simply. "Anyone would have done the same." Emily shook her head. "No, they wouldn't have. Not here. People they look away. Pretend they didn't see. It's easier that way." Jack stared into his coffee for a moment, the reflection of the diner lights rippling in the dark liquid. "Yeah," he murmured. "Easier doesn't mean right." The cook had gone home early after giving his statement to the police, and now it was just the two of them in the dim glow of the neon sign. Outside, the puddles shimmered under the streetlight, and the sound of tires passing through water broke the stillness every few minutes. Emily leaned against the counter, watching him. "You've seen a lot, haven't you?" she asked softly. Jack didn't look up. Enough to know some battles never stay overseas. There was a pause, not awkward, but heavy with meaning. She hesitated before asking, "You have a family?" Jack's eyes softened, and for the first time that night, a trace of pain flickered there. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the small, folded photograph she'd seen earlier. He set it on the counter gently, as if it were something fragile. A picture of a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, smiling wide at the camera, front teeth missing, freckles scattered across her cheeks. Her hair was the same shade of brown as Emily's. "My daughter," he said quietly. "Lily. She's beautiful," Emily said with a smile. "She's my whole world," Jack murmured. "Haven't seen her in 6 months." Emily frowned. "Why not?" He hesitated. "Her mom and I divorced after I got back. I wasn't exactly easy to live with. Nightmares, short temper. You know, all the usual souvenirs." He chuckled bitterly. "Court said I needed to get help before I could have her full time. So I've been working on it." There was honesty in his voice, raw and unguarded. Emily's heart ached a little. "You will," she said softly. "You seem like a good dad." Jack smiled faintly. "Trying to be. She deserves better than the man I used to be." For a while, they sat in comfortable silence. The rain outside had stopped completely now, leaving only the quiet hum of the old refrigerator and the faint buzzes of the neon sign. "You know," Emily said after a while, "when I first saw you tonight, I thought you looked like someone carrying the weight of the world." Jack laughed softly. "I was. Still am, maybe. But it feels a little lighter now." But she tilted her head. "Because of what happened. Because I remembered what it feels like to do something that matters," he said. "Out there, it's all rules and orders. Here, it's just right and wrong." And tonight, I got to choose right. His words lingered in the air. Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. She'd spent so long enduring. Never fighting back, never believing anyone would stand up for her. Tonight had changed that. She smiled, blinking back the sudden sting of tears. You did more than that, Jack. You reminded me people like you still exist. Jack looked at her, his eyes soft but steady. People like me. People who don't walk away. He didn't respond. Just gave a quiet nod, finishing his coffee before glancing toward the door. I should probably hit the road. Got a long drive ahead tomorrow. Where to? Montana, he said. That's where Lily lives now. Emily hesitated. You sure it's safe to drive tonight? You've had a long day. Jack smiled warily. Safer than sitting still, I think. She wanted to say something, maybe ask him to stay, or at least rest for a few hours. But she saw in his expression that it wasn't an option. He was a man used to moving, to leaving before anyone got too close. Still, as he stood to leave, she reached out and touched his arm lightly. Jack, thank you. For everything. He nodded once. Take care of yourself, Emily. When he stepped outside, the air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of wet asphalt and coffee. The sky was clearing, stars peeking through the thinning clouds. Emily watched through the window as he climbed into his old pickup truck, headlights flaring to life. For a moment, he sat there, hands resting on the wheel, eyes lost in thought. Then, slowly, the truck pulled away, disappearing into the darkness. Inside, Emily stood alone in the quiet diner, feeling both safe and strangely hollow. She turned off the lights one by one, her reflection fading in the window, until only the neon glow of Marty's diner remained. Somewhere down the road, Jack drove with the photograph of Lily on the dashboard. The girl's smile lit by passing streetlights. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was heading somewhere that mattered. Not away from something, but toward it. He didn't know that the night wasn't quite finished writing his story. Because as his taillights disappeared into the fog, another pair of headlights flickered on behind him. Far enough to go unnoticed, but close enough to follow. Jack's truck rolled down the empty highway, tires humming a steady rhythm against the wet asphalt. The storm had left behind a pale mist that curled through the trees like breath, soft and ghostly. His wipers moved in a slow, tired rhythm, swish, swish, keeping time with the low hum of the radio that played some forgotten country tune. For a while, he just drove. The world outside was quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes after chaos. His knuckles still ached faintly from the fight, but his mind was calmer than it had been in months. Emily's words replayed in his head. People who don't walk away. He smiled to himself, faint but real. Maybe that's what Lily needed to see one day. Not the soldier, not the broken man trying to heal, but the father who didn't walk away. He checked the clock. 1:37 a.m. Still hours from dawn, still more miles to go before he could find a place to rest. Then he noticed them, headlights in his rearview mirror. Bright. Too bright. They'd been there for the last 2 turns, keeping distance but not losing pace. His smile faded. Old instincts flickered to life. He eased off the gas, letting the truck slow slightly. The car behind him matched speed. When he sped up again, so did they. All right, Jack murmured, glancing into the mirror. The vehicle behind him was a black SUV, big, powerful, wrong for these back roads. No license plate light. No mistake, someone was following him. He knew who it was before he even saw the driver's face. Rick Dalton wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat quietly. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter. The police had probably released him with a fine and a warning. Small, town justice, quick and forgetful. And now Rick was chasing the one man who'd made him look weak. The road ahead curved through a patch of forest, dense and dark. No traffic, no witnesses. Jack's mind began to work automatically, the way it had overseas, mapping terrain, calculating escape routes. There was an old gas station up ahead, one he'd passed on the way to town earlier. If he could make it there, maybe. The SUV suddenly accelerated. Its headlights flared in his mirrors, blinding him for a moment before the vehicle swerved close, clipping the corner of his rear bumper. The impact jolted him forward. The truck fishtailed, tires screeching against the slick road. Jack gritted his teeth, fighting the wheel, regaining control. All right, he said under his breath. You want round 2? You got it. He slowed deliberately, letting the SUV pull up beside him. For a second, through the rain-streaked window, he saw Rick's face. Wild, grinning, eyes bloodshot and drunk. Rick rolled down his window and shouted something Jack couldn't hear over the wind. But he didn't need to. The hatred in Rick's expression said it all. Then Rick rammed the side of Jack's truck. Hard, metal screamed. Jack's truck swerved, tires sliding dangerously close to the ditch. He yanked the wheel left, narrowly avoiding the edge. Rick hit him again. Stupid move, Jack muttered. He slammed on his brakes. The SUV shot forward, overshooting the curve. Jack watched as Rick tried to correct, but the wet road betrayed him. The SUV spun sideways, tires skidding, until it slammed nose first into the guardrail with a deafening crunch. Jack pulled over, heart pounding, breath sharp and steady. Steam hissed from the SUV's crumpled hood. The engine sputtered once, then died. The only sounds were the ticking of Jack's cooling engine, and the faint hiss of rain against metal. For a long moment, he just sat there, gripping the wheel, staring through the windshield. Then he opened the door and stepped out. The air smelled of wet asphalt and gasoline. He approached slowly, boots splashing through puddles, his body tense but calm. The SUV's headlights had gone out, but the interior dumb light glowed faintly, illuminating Rick slumped over the steering wheel. "Rick," Jack called out. "You alive?" No answer. Just a groan, muffled and weak. Jack moved closer, checked through the broken glass. Rick was conscious but dazed, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. Chase was in the passenger seat, cursing softly, clutching his shoulder. Eddie was nowhere to be seen. Maybe he'd decided not to join this round of stupidity. Jack sighed and pulled out his phone. "Yeah, 911. He said when the operator answered. "There's been an accident on Highway 14, about 5 miles past Marty's diner. 2 injured, possibly drunk. Send an ambulance and a patrol unit." "Sir, are you involved?" the dispatcher asked. "Not anymore," he replied, eyes fixed on Rick. "But I'll stay until help arrives." He ended the call and leaned against his truck, crossing his arms, rain soaking into his jacket again. Rick stirred, groaning louder now. His voice came out rough, slurred. "You think you won, huh?" Jack stared at him. "No, Rick. Nobody wins when you choose this." Rick tried to laugh, but it came out more like a cough. "You think you're some kind of savior, but you're just like me. You like the fight." Jack stepped closer, his face calm but eyes hard. "No, I hate it. But I won't let men like you make the world smaller for everyone else." Rick sneered weakly. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Jack said. "You hurt people because it makes you feel strong. But real strength doesn't come from fear. It comes from stopping it." For a moment, Rick just stared at him. Something unreadable passing across his face. Maybe shame. Maybe understanding. Or maybe just the emptiness of a man who'd run out of excuses. Sirens echoed in the distance again. Jack stepped back as the flashing lights painted the trees red and blue once more. When the officers arrived, Jack gave his statement quietly, hands steady, voice even. Then he climbed back into his truck, nodded to the paramedics, and drove away. As the flashing lights faded behind him, he whispered to himself, "That's it, Jack. Time to go home." But home wasn't just a place, it was a promise. And this time, he intended to keep it. Dawn crept over the horizon slowly, washing the sky in soft pinks and silvers. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the world fresh and quiet. Like it had been scrubbed clean of all its noise. Jack's truck rolled along the empty country road, the first rays of sunlight glinting off the wet pavement. His eyes were tired, but they carried a peace that hadn't been there in years. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by something steadier. A sense of closure. For the first time since coming back from war, Jack felt like he'd done something that mattered here, in this quiet, broken world that had once felt so foreign to him. He pulled into a small rest stop by the edge of a meadow. Birds were beginning to stir, shaking water from their wings, their calls soft and scattered. He parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment, letting the silence sink in. The photograph of Lily still sat on the dashboard, the corner edges curled slightly. Jack reached for it, his thumb tracing the outline of her smile. "Almost there, kiddo," he whispered. "Almost there." He leaned back, eyes half closed, the memories drifting like old film reels. The desert heat, the sound of rotor blades, the faces of men he'd left behind. The noise, the chaos, the guilt that followed him home like a shadow that never learned how to sleep. But last night, standing up, doing something right, had quieted that shadow for a moment. He hadn't realized how much he'd needed that. A knock on his window startled him from his thoughts. Jack blinked, then turned, and to his surprise, it was Emily. She stood outside his truck, smiling shyly, her diner uniform replaced by a light jacket and jeans. Steam curled from the coffee cup in her hand, He rolled down the window, brow furrowing. "Emily, what are you doing out here?" "I figured you'd take this road," she said, holding out the cup. "Fresh coffee. Thought you could use one for the drive." He accepted it, smiling despite himself. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said softly. "You left before I could really thank you." He chuckled. "I think we covered that last night." "Not really?" she replied, leaning on the door. "You didn't just stop a fight, Jack. You reminded me that there are still good people left. People who don't just survive, but stand up for something." Jack looked down at the coffee cup, the steam rising between them. "You give me too much credit." "No," she said firmly. "I don't think I give you enough." For a long moment, they just stood there in the morning stillness. The sun had climbed higher now, streaking gold through the trees. A few trucks rumbled by on the distant highway, but otherwise, the world seemed to have paused just for them. Jack sighed, setting the cup on the dashboard. "You know, last night wasn't about me being brave. It was about doing what should have been done a long time ago." Emily tilted her head. "Still sounds like bravery to me." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just a man trying to make peace with himself." She looked at him. The lines around his eyes, the scar on his jaw, the weary kindness in his expression. "You going to see her now? Your daughter?" "Yeah," he said softly. "It's time." "You nervous?" He chuckled. "Terrified." Emily smiled, stepping back from the truck. "You'll be fine, Jack. She's lucky to have you." He started the engine, the low rumble breaking the calm. "Take care of yourself, Emily. Don't let anyone push you around again." "I won't," she said, smiling. "Thanks to you." He gave a small wave, and the truck rolled back onto the road. Emily watched until it disappeared over the hill, her reflection fading in the side mirror. Then she turned back toward the diner. Toward a new kind of morning. Jack drove through the countryside for hours, the world waking up around him. Farmers heading out to fields. Kids waiting for school buses, sunlight spilling across valleys still heavy with mist. Every mile brought him closer to the small Montana town where Lily lived. By noon, he reached a quiet neighborhood lined with oak trees and white fences. He parked across the street from a modest house. Blue shutters. A tire swing swaying lazily in the front yard. A woman stood on the porch. His ex-wife Sarah. She spotted the truck and froze. Jack stepped out, holding the photo in his hand. Sarah's expression was cautious, but not angry. Maybe she'd seen the change in him even from afar. The weight that had finally started to lift. "Hey," he said quietly as he approached. "Hey," she replied. "You look better." "Trying to be." He smiled awkwardly. "Is she home?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded toward the yard. "She's been waiting to see you." Jack turned. And there she was. Lily, sitting cross-legged beneath the oak tree, drawing in her notebook. She looked up, squinting against the sun, and then her face lit up with recognition. "Daddy." The word hit him like a wave. Soft, familiar, and overwhelming. He crouched as she ran toward him, arms flung wide. When she crashed into his chest, laughing, he held her tighter than he had held anything in years. "Hey, Peanut," he whispered, voice thick. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too," she said, grinning. "Mom said you were coming soon, but I didn't think you'd be here today." He smiled, blinking back the tears. "I couldn't wait any longer." For a moment, time stood still. The sunlight, the wind in the trees, the smell of grass. It all felt impossibly alive. He looked at Sarah, who stood by the porch watching, her expression softening. She gave a small nod, silent permission. Jack took Lily's hand. "How about we go get some ice cream? You can tell me everything I missed." "Okay," she said, tugging him toward the truck. "But I'm picking the flavor." He laughed, a deep, unguarded laugh that felt like the first breath, after years underwater. As they drove off, the afternoon sun warmed the windshield, glinting off the photo still resting on the dash. For the first time in a long, long while, Jack Turner didn't feel like a man running from ghosts. He felt like a father going home. And somewhere back in that sleepy little town,